Sunda Energy. That's the AIM-quoted exploration and appraisal company focused on gas assets in Southeast Asia. 2024 has been a period of significant change for the company. I use that word wisely because there's been a change of name, several appointments to the board of directors, and a new strategy focused solely on Southeast Asia. Dr. Andy Butler is the chief executive, and yes, what a year you've had.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate that. Come on slightly earlier than expected. Please don't ask me any mining questions. I'm not particularly qualified in that space. Thank you, and thanks to everybody that's dialed in this evening. Greatly appreciate your interest. So, I will hopefully stay on the line for the duration of this. I've got a 15-minute presentation. I'll try and go through it fairly quickly so that there's time for the Q&A. Excuse me. Okay, there we go. Let's put you down there. Okay, so there's plenty of time for Q&A because, of course, I'm sure that's what a lot of people want to hear. So I'll run quickly through a presentation so we can get to that. The presentation that's available, that I'm showing, is available on the website. There is maybe not that much new that's on there compared to some of the things we've shown previously. No particularly big new news that have been announced today, but we are entering into a very exciting period in the coming weeks and months. And this really sets the context for that, and your questions will be interesting in that regard. So a few introductory remarks here, but particularly talk about gas in Southeast Asia and focus on the Chuditch prospect in Timor-Leste. Mention a little bit around some of the new business before going into that Q&A session. So Sunda's obviously, it's a AIM-listed company. As Sarah said, we're focused exclusively on Southeast Asia. We're focused on gas in this region, and our key asset is inside Timor-Leste. The first question is essentially, why gas? Why Southeast Asia? Why do we think this is a great part of the world to be investing in the gas business? And the simple answer is demand. This is a gassy region, naturally gassy region, but it's also the region in which a significant proportion of the population of the planet lives, going through great economic growth periods. So GDP growth in this region is substantial across all the major economies in Southeast Asia. That's in Indonesia and the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, etc., and Singapore, where I'm based, of course, as an established, very developed economy. And that translates into energy demand that's very robust. All forms of energy. It's not coal, it's not gas, it's all of the above. Coal is growing as a source of power generation in this region. The map on the left-hand side indicates existing and particularly new and planned power stations for coal. Quite astonishing the amount of generation that's growing there. Gas, as you'll see from the Shell chart, is probably the most strongly growing fuel in terms of demand in this region, and will represent 40% of power generation by 2040, and that's 4 times growth almost from where we were a few years ago. Same is true for renewables, for gas, for solar, for wind, for biomass, for geothermal, all of the above. So a great region to be exploring, a great region to be developing gas assets. And our playing field is Southeast Asia. We see a lot of opportunity to develop a business focused on gas in Southeast Asia, be it in the Western, indicated there, more populous regions, where there's more gas infrastructure, the large demand centres in the major cities that are there, and also in the eastern parts of this region, which are less populated, but large gas assets that are more in the sort of appraisal phase, as this is the case with Chuditch, which you can see towards the bottom of that map, and that's what I'll focus on. Okay, so the Chuditch asset is a very material asset. It's sat in the middle of the Timor Sea, between the Northern Territories of Australia. You see Darwin at the bottom of the map there, and the island of Timor to the north. Timor-Leste is most of the eastern end of that island. And we sit in a fairway of gas resources, which is very substantial, very extensive. All of the red blobs there represent gas fields, all within the same Jurassic reservoir systems, and we're really in the heart of that fairway. Within the Timor-Leste offshore territories, there are 3 main gas assets. Sunrise, which is an undeveloped field to the north of us, which has some partial Australian jurisdiction, which there's quite a lot of news recently and coming, but is in the development stage and is probably going to take some time to develop. To the west of us is the Baundan field, with a pipeline that extends down to Darwin, a field that's been on production for about 20 years. And roughly, and in those 20 years, which is most of the time of Timor-Leste existing as an independent nation, that single gas asset has produced more than 80% of the GDP of that nation. And so what that tells you is this is a jurisdiction where we're working, which is very, really appreciates the value of these gas assets, is very dependent on them, and is very encouraging of our activities in trying to develop the Chuditch field, which is in the area of our block there, shown in this roughly triangular shape in orange. So I'll zoom in to the block, give a bit of background to those who are not familiar for the activities that we've carried out and the Chuditch field, what it's all about. So large triangular shaped block, all the action really is on the southern and eastern sides, close to the maritime boundary with Australia. The red area is the Chuditch gas field itself. It's a field that was discovered in 1998 by Shell in shallow water, in a pretty simple geological setting. But at a time when there was no market for gas, there was no infrastructure to develop gas, and there was the geological technology, the imaging technology was nothing like what it was today. So essentially they found the edge of a gas field. They couldn't really see what it was that they had found, and despite that, there was nowhere to take that gas anyway. What we have done in the last few years is really get to grips with that using modern technology, and of course we're in a different market context altogether, whereas, as I've been explaining, gas is a highly valuable commodity in the Asia-Pacific region. So for the first time through our studies, particularly reprocessing of seismic data, we have been able to image the field properly, to image the extent of it, and to quantify the amount of gas that's present in that, and also to properly resolve adjacent features which are undrilled, and those are the three orange features, one to the north and two to the west, southwest, which are undrilled features but which are very close to and at the same level and the same geology to the existing field. And in the case of the one to the north, you see it's almost touching the existing field, and I believe actually in the passage of time we will prove that it's part of the same field. The existing field itself, where Shell had originally thought they had about 700 billion cubic feet of sales gas, we've increased that through our work by roughly 50%, more than 50%, approaching 1.2 TCF of gas in the mid case. And then the additional, as yet undrilled resources, there are more than 2 trillion cubic feet of gas there. So more than 3 TCF, trillion cubic feet of gas on the asset, either discovered or very low risk add-on. And that's the equivalent in oil terms of more than 500 million barrels. Vast resources, and for a junior company like ourselves, obviously hugely material. We're 60% of this asset. We are in partnership with Timor-Gap. Timor-Gap is the national energy company of Timor-Leste. And as I mentioned earlier, because of that very strong drive in country to develop future gas resources to underpin the economy, we do see very strong alignment. That's with the regulator known as ANP, with Timor-Gap, and indeed the ministry. And following on from Mike, who we've lost, I'm also seeing the minister frequently. I'll be meeting him again next week. We have a very good relationship, and the door is generally open. Okay. So our next steps with this asset, having quantified and realised what we have, is to drill an appraisal well. This is the well that we're planning to drill. I've shown this previously, so I'll reiterate. Essentially, as you'll see from the section on the left-hand side, we're planning to drill a well, a simple, straightforward well to the crest of the feature, whereas the original Shell well was drilled on the flanks. Where that well encountered 30 metres, we expect to encounter about 150 metres of a vertical gas column, a very tall column of gas. We're going to drill some way from the original well. So look, the map on the right, the colours there, this is on top of the reservoir, but the colours represent the thickness of gas. And you'll see that we are drilling on that the location to the right there, the Chuditch 2 well in the core of the thick gas pay. And we're critically going to try and flow test. We are going to flow test that well. And that then will give us indication, the confirmation of future producibility of the gas, and that translates into a development plan and ultimately into cash flow. In terms of our plans for it, and I'm sure I'll say more later on, but we have talked about drilling this well in Q2 2005. I'll reiterate here, our guidance is that we will be drilling this well in 2025, sorry, Q2 2025, and we will be testing it as part of that campaign, of course. and we are advanced in all of our preparations, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. But it includes the rig and all the procurement that goes with it. Okay, now I mentioned testing and our confidence around testing, so I thought maybe I'd just reinforce that point a little bit, because it is the key objective of this well. And why are we so bullish around how this will produce? Now, I'm a geologist, different things can happen, but we do feel that with great confidence that this should test very well and in the future produce very well. The log on the right-hand side, the vertical log, that's the section through the reservoir interval in the discovery well. You'll see that it's mostly yellow. Yellow represents sandstone, which represents reservoir, and then the red bit at the top is where the gas was present in that well. So essentially, it's pretty much all reservoir, all well connected, if you could see the other reservoirs across this gas fairway, you'd say that actually this is one of the best looking intervals of reservoir, and indeed it continues, we believe with great confidence, below the bottom of the well. So great reservoir with gas in it, and most of that reservoir section you see will be in the gas interval in the well that we are going to drill. The map on the left is effectively a traffic light map for risk, so the chances of having good flow rates. And we're strongly in the green, in the same green section that Sunrise is into the north of us and Bayoundan to the west. And it really represents depth of burial of these rocks. And so the deeper you bury, after a certain threshold point, you start to lose the quality that's present in the reservoir. We're still within that sweet zone, not so shallow that you don't have pressure to help you produce the gas, not so deep that you've lost the reservoir quality. So essentially, best looking reservoir in the area at the right depth interval for it to flow well. And the flow rates that you see indicated for the Bayoundan field to the west, for example, and Sunrise to the north of us, are really excellent flow rates. So we hope to replicate, and we are confident we will replicate those flow rates. We can take that further now. We can start to really model what production will be like based on the flow rates that we expect and based on the reservoirs that have been encountered and our mapping and imaging of the field. That's what's illustrated here. I shan't go into the detail of it too much, but what we are really demonstrating clearly through a simple development program simulated into the reservoir, into the field, that in several phases of drilling, with just 3 production wells in a first phase and 3 production in a second phase, as a absolute base case on just the proven resources so far, we can be producing more than 200 million cubic feet per day for more than a decade, 13 years or so. As I'll stress, just from the existing field in those phases. Second phase, and indeed later phases, bringing in the undrilled areas, would be funded, of course, from those first phases. So all very positive. This is all the work that's ongoing in preparation for the result that we anticipate, which is a very positive flow test from the appraisal well that we're going to drill. And the idea is that we do not get to a situation where we have a successful appraisal, then we go, and now what? But rather, let's get after it. We have a development plan. We want to get producing, and you'll note that from the charts that I'm showing, including on this next slide, we are working towards production from the start of 2028. Ambitious, very achievable. That's 2.5 years after the completion of appraisal and testing in this next well. So the illustration here really just pulls together that in terms of a phase development. It's graphical, nice sort of display, but the underlying concept is we've got a great first field. It's reaching out into that field of progressive phases, into the undrilled areas and progressive phases. This is an asset with huge resource potential, huge resources known and additional potential, and one that can produce at a high plateau production rate for a long period of time, delivering very substantial cash flows from 2028 onwards for investors, and of course for the nation of Timor-Leste. Okay. I'll just, before we jump into questions and things around this, I'd like to say a little bit around the application we've made in the Philippines as well, the applications that we've made in the Philippines. And part of the strategy of building a portfolio of very material gas assets, as we have in Chuditch, we've made some applications as part of a consortium for 2 blocks in the southern end of the Philippines. This is within the Sulu Sea. It's very close to Malaysia and Borneo, but it's still in the Philippines. We do not yet, we've bid in a consortium with 3 other parties, 2 of whom are Filipino parties. It's an area that we're very excited about, an area we know well. We know it well. including the gas discoveries that are there, because we made them. We were part of a consortium in previous company, myself and my colleagues, that were responsible for those gas discoveries. We see great potential with those discoveries, and in particular in the upside that's around them. We look forward to starting to get to work on those. There are no awards as yet. The applications were uncontested, so we're obviously confident around award. We've previously given guidance that we expect to have positive news on this during Q4 2024. I stand by that guidance, despite the fact that we're getting very late in the year. The Filipinos have been working through their processes in a timely fashion, and I think they're getting towards the end of it. If it's not this year, we're obviously getting close to Christmas, we expect it to be very early in the new year. So interesting, positive news flow coming from there as well, and one that I look forward to saying more about once we've crossed that line. Okay, so just sort of wrapping up, we are obviously a gas-focused player in the region that sees a great opportunity to build a portfolio of assets here. We're based in the region. We've built a strong team in the region, a lot of experience, a lot of expertise, and a very strong focus on the asset in Timor-Leste, where we see that with the alignment we have with government, with the quality of the asset, with the resources that are potential in the asset, we think there's a lot of value to unlock. We will be drilling a well in the second quarter of next year. We're working towards that in many ways. And actually, I'll finish with a question before handing back to Sarah to continue with questions. And the question is essentially one that I see coming is essentially, where are you with those drilling preparations, including all the organisational aspects and including, of course, the funding. So I've been stressing here that our guidance is reiterated for Q2 2025 drilling. We are making good progress on a rig contract. It's a complex and large contract, and this is normal, but we're working through that, and we see no issues. Our procurement processes, in terms of the long lead items, are pretty much secured. The drill team, as I say, a world-class drill team working with me, who I'm very proud and very capable team, are working towards all aspects of being able to drill that well, from the environmental approvals, from all the engineering aspects of it, logistics aspects, etc. So that's all coming together really very nicely. And on the funding side, that is also progressing pretty well. We're talking to strategic investors. We've talked previously about our relationship with Pacific LNG, with whom we are putting together funding. But I'd stress that what we're not looking to do is fund a single isolated activity in the drilling of a well. What I've been talking about here really is a integrated project, which gas projects have to be. They have to be an integrated story that comes out of it in terms of everything from the resource in the ground to the ultimate destination point for that gas. And I've talked quite bullishly about the ability of these reservoirs to deliver well, and we can build in this situation an aggressive development plan. What we're looking at and what we're talking around with our investors is that integrated development planning, which starts with the drilling of the well next year, for which we are obviously progressing at great speed in executing. So I think with that, Sarah, I'll hand it back to you to fire some more questions at me.
Many thanks indeed. So you and Mike both have access to the ministers. So you've seen the minister recently. You said his door was always open. So what was the most recent conversation about?
Yeah, I mean, and I threw that comment in there because it fell on from my previous presenter. No, I mean, there's a great deal of interest. We not just the minister, I mean, across government, across Timorese society, our project is being followed closely. Because, as I mentioned, there are three gas assets there. There's a lot of interest in the Sunrise field to the north of us that is moving, hopefully, towards development. Hopefully we'll hear more about that soon. And the Bayundan field, which is late in life. And, ours is an asset that has the potential to be brought on stream pretty quickly. We'll be drilling it next. It'll be the next big activity in country. So there's a great deal of attention in terms of what we're trying to do, and a great deal of support. We have fantastic support from the regulator and from the minister, and encouragement, which enable us to get on and do what we need to do as quickly as we need to do it.
There's always a frisson of excitement when you mention a major in your company's history. It's Shell made the discovery decades ago. And I know that, as you said, the technology was different, if non-existent really, compared to today's standards. But a question that came in ahead of this webinar, did Shell ever test the flow? And if not, why not? And what gives you the confidence that the well can flow at viable commercial rates?
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, no, they did not. They did not test it. And thankfully, they did not test it, actually. It's been my general answer, because had they done so, then I'm very confident there's an asset that would not be sat with Sunda and sat with, with myself and our investors. Because they drilled a very good well back in the day. They drilled that well in just 13 days, down to 3,000 meters, which is very quick. They acquired a lot of interesting information, quite some samples, particularly logs. They kind of acquired a core, which is a physical section of rock that they brought to the surface. So we know an awful lot about what's down there in terms of the gas, in terms of the reservoir and the quality of that reservoir. But they did not flow test it. And why not? For the reasons I touched on earlier on, there was no commercial justification for flow testing. It's an expensive exercise. But if you haven't got a market to take it to, if you haven't got the infrastructure to help you develop it, so why would you do that? You don't need that additional information at the time. I think, back then there was a lot more focus on liquids, either oil or the liquids that come with gas sometimes, and this is what we call a dry gas. So it's gas without a lot of liquid. Liquid's a much easier thing to develop, so had they found liquids, they'd have done something with it. They didn't, they found gas. Back then, with this asset, but also across a lot of Asia, why there's a lot of opportunity, back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, when a lot of exploration was taking place, gas was a failure. Today, gas is a success. So that's why they didn't test it. It wasn't the result they were looking for.
Understood. Now, I know that there has been frustration, delays, reflecting the overruns by the operators of the preferred rig. However, you've given us reassurance within your presentation that things are going to plan. However, about best made plans. What would happen if that rig did not become available? Do you have others that are possibilities, or are you holding out for that preferred rig?
No, we're focused on a rig, and we're advanced in our discussions with that rig. There are not that many rigs in this area. There are plenty of rigs globally. The ones that are closer are more accessible, and you don't need to mobilise them long distances. That obviously comes with cost and other logistical challenges. So no, we are focused on one particular rig. We don't see any particular concerns around it. Things do change, of course they do. We've been involved in a lot of operations in the past. Sometimes they go a bit quicker, sometimes they go a bit slower, and it's not like renting a car and there's lots in the parking bays there. You've got to wait for the one that you want to become available. But basically, it's a good rig. It's operating in the area. Because it's operating presently, then it means the activities are being carried out efficiently. It's not the people and the equipment are not starting cold. So we're bullish around it. I've wanted to reiterate on this call as I have the timelines to which we're operating. When we're confident that's the case. We're working extremely hard for all the preparations that are required for that. These offshore drilling activities are hugely complex, many aspects, logistics, preparation, engineering, people, all of those things. It's all coming together. So it's going to be an exciting period ahead.
But that rig is an essential part of the jigsaw. Do you think that the funding will not come, or the funding that you want will not come until that rig is in place? And once the rig's in place, it's like, right, we're ready to go, and the money will come in.
No, I mean, everything runs in parallel. So our preparations, and there's a lot of preparations going on, and a lot of people are working very hard to make it happen. That's going on. The approvals, the discussions with the government, making sure that everything is ready from their side, and the funding. We're working on all of these things. Obviously, as I was saying, there's a holistic element to it as well. It's an integrated gas project. We want to make sure that we understand what we're going to do with it. I often make the comment, we're not in the business of trying to better understand a stranded asset. We're in the business of making sure we have a plan for that asset. We're going to prove the concept through this activity and execute that concept in the period that follows this activity.
Okay, so this is quite a lengthy one, but it's got a good backstory. From previous presentations, it was stated that the Chuditch gas field forecasted contingent capacity of 1.6 trillion cubic feet. Is the reason for Chuditch 2 drilling planned for Q2 of 2025 simply to confirm the 1.6 TCF capacity, or is it to discover further resources?
No, this well is about validating the resources that we've got there. As I was stating, the reprocessing, the technical studies we've carried out has given us a greater resource size than we originally thought was present. But we need to confirm that. At the moment, we've got much better imaging data, but you still need to drill the well to confirm it. That's objective number one, but an equally important objective, as I was stating, was around the flow testing, the production testing, to demonstrate that you can then build a development quickly on it. I showed a diagram where we talked about what that development would look like in the subsurface, with our first phase of 3 development wells. I think those wells would come pretty quickly after the successful appraisal, and also at that point we would be looking to drill the adjacent exploration features to get the upside resources, which at this present time are not contingent, they are prospective, they are unproven.
Before we go on to the Philippines, this question is about the Philippines. Could you put forward a clear timeline for Sunda's exploration activities in the Philippines and in Indonesia over the coming 12 months, together with updates on current and future license applications?
Okay, well, firstly, in Indonesia, we don't have anything presently that I've talked about inside Indonesia. I mean, it's an interesting country, a country that's rich in resources. It's on our radar, but we've not mentioned Indonesia up until now. The Philippines is our timeline. Well, first, at the moment, of course, we have not yet been awarded those assets. We're confident that we will be in the near future. In the first instance, we will be looking to essentially do what we've been doing with Chuditch, to do good technical, very solid subsurface technical work to really understand the resources that are there, both proven and as yet undrilled. Then the results from those studies will then drive the forward work program from there, leading ultimately to drilling. The timelines will be what they will be, but essentially the first year or couple of years will be one of data, of detailed studies to really understand the subsurface, and then you make a call on drilling it.
Okay, I want to talk to you about safety. The Sulu Sea, of course, nestled between the Philippines, Malaysia and Indonesia, it still continues to face significant maritime security challenges, some issues on land, terra firma as well. Has this been factored into the business plan should you be met with any hostilities? Interesting question.
It's a region that's had a lot of trouble in the past. I mean, the region that we're making the application in, it's a autonomous area within the Philippines. It's a Muslim area within the Philippines. Previously, it was one where there was some disputes, effectively insurgency from the Muslim area, and a lot of troubles that came around it. Those issues have been resolved. There's now been a lot more autonomy given to that region. They have their own resource rights, and that's why our licensing is in the framework of that autonomous region, the Bangsamoro region, known as BAM. So it's much less problematic than it used to be. But even saying that, we've operated in that region previously, as I indicated when we were speaking. We've drilled wells there, we've operated seismic vessels there in the past. We never had any issues at all with any sort of piracy or any conflict situations. Yeah. So, and I should say we're some way away from the disputed areas of the South China Sea where there have been disturbances. But no, we're not involved in any of that.
Okay, and long may that continue if you get those licenses. And when might we hear if you've been successful?
Well, as I said, we've been saying for some time we're hopeful that the Filipino governments have been saying Q4 2024. We are still hopeful that that's the case. I was in Manila about 10 days ago. There was a lot of optimism about announcements coming fairly soon. The end of the year is approaching, so it's possible it slips beyond it, but I don't think it'll be very far beyond it if that's the case. So it's obviously out of our hands. It's in the hands of the authorities, but we are bullish about being able to make some announcements fairly soon.
Excellent. So when I introduced you and the company, I talked about it being a transitional year, name change. You came on board, with you're the new leader, and some significant appointments onto the board. So one question is, how would you describe the working culture of the organisation? Is it all bedded in?
I would certainly bed it in. Good question. Very hardworking, a really good team of people, and a team that I'm very proud of. We're very sort of go-getting. Quite a disparate group that are very aligned in trying to achieve the goals that we've got. Enjoyable people, very talented people, and as a small organisation, we have to in this business operate to the highest possible standards in terms of the technical work we do, the drilling we do, but also the safety standards and everything else. So you might be a small company, but you've got to operate as if you're a big company in those standards. But what you cannot do as a small company is have mediocrity. You can't do things you can't carry a lot of dead wood around. We don't, and we have very, very good team. So very, very focused. But it works, and I think we all enjoy working together. Many of us have worked together over many years, and sometimes in different organisations. So it's a good, close relationship. So hopefully that answers your question.
It's interesting you describe yourself as a small company. What's the aspiration?
Well, we're going to succeed with what we're trying to do in Timor-Leste. We see a lot of opportunity around the region. This is a very large region with huge demand growth and not a lot of players in the space where we're operating. So I think we can see a long runway. A lot of things could happen on that runway, but we want to create a lot of value with this business and enjoy it in doing so.
Excellent. Enjoyment is half the battle. So thank you very much indeed. And congratulations for everything you have achieved so far this year, because we've still got 3 weeks to go.
Yeah, pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.